few words. Yes, great.
Very few minutes, Paul.
Very
please.
few. Okay. So then let me just go ahead and start. Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back. I'm glad to see you all at the 16th edition of CELINE. As most of you know, I'm Paul Buzila from the University of Bucharest, and I'm glad to see you. And I'm glad that with this edition, we're also starting our third year, and also happy to continue a series of events where we discuss things related to relational network theory. Because we have with us today Gisela Müller, an old friend of R&D, let's say. Gisela, welcome. Thank you for accepting our invitation. So now I'm torn between saying all those marvelous things about you that I would like to say and trying to keep it short so that you can go ahead and start. Let me just say then that among many interesting things Gisela has done, she has also, she's a researcher at the National Scientific and Technical Research Council in Argentina and a full professor of theoretical linguistics at the University of Cuyo. She was in the past editor-in-chief of the journal Análisis de Lingvistică, the one that we presented last time, and also the director of Juan Coromina's Institute of Linguistics. And her main areas of research are cognitive grammar, textual comprehension, scientific and academic discourse, and more recently, the theoretical links between cognitive grammar and the relational network theory of language. Hence, her talk today, which is titled Semantic-structural assembly and sequence management, cognitive grammar in dialogue with relational network theory. Without further ado, Gisela, we are ready to listen to you. And of course, at the end, we can have a Q&A session. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Paul, for this such a warm presentation, and thank you everyone here today, especially Professor Lam and all my colleagues from the university. Okay, I will share the screen. Just a second. Here. Ahí está. Mode, presentation mode. It's okay. I see you. I can't see all the. I don't know why.
We can see your presentation. That's fine. If you put it on presentation mode.
Ahí está. Ya está. Can you see it?
Yes. Now it's perfect.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Well, the title is Semantic-structural assembly and sequence management, cognitive grammar in dialogue with relational network theory. Bueno, this is my. I begin with this picture, and I don't know if Sidney Lam remembers this moment at home in night. Okay. Yes. Yes, we were eating a barbecue and Mendocinian wine with Mendocinian wine, and Sidney Lam was in Mendoza giving a series of conferences at the University of Cuyo. Well, before let's start with a brief introduction. According to Sidney Lam, most linguistic theories that claim to be cognitive do not build a true bridge between the brain and language, insofar as they propose metaphorical descriptions that appeal to symbols that are stored in certain places and then retrieved. Or, he says, complex systems of phonological and syntactic rules, far too complex in their operation to be executed by a human brain in real time. Also far too complex to be learned by the ordinary child. By basing this hypothesis on an illusion of transparency, which does not distinguish between what the system is capable of doing and what it actually does to produce a certain effect, such approaches cannot be considered realistic or plausibly from a neurocognitive point of view. On a solid foundation of linguistic, psychological, and neurocognitive evidence, based on an improved version of connectionism, CELINE seeks to dispel this illusion and demonstrate how linguistic information is activated in the brain as it travels through the different networks and construct specific nodes and connections. Some functionalists or cognitive functionalists...
Hablamos, porque la verdad que...
Sorry,
It was by mistake. You can go on. Yeah.
Okay. I can't see you. Some functionalists or cognitive functional linguistic theories, although they do not specifically or systematically address the brain-language relationship, may aspire to neurocognitive plausibility. Such is the case with Halliday's systemic functional linguistics and Ronald Langacker cognitive grammar. Halliday explicitly affirms the compatibility of his approach with neurocognitive theory. He says, Lamb set out to model the neural processes involved in making meaning, in producing and receiving instances of language. His intra-organism perspective complements the inter-organism perspective that is being adopted here. For this, I go on with cognitive grammar. For its part, cognitive grammar, from its origins to its most current formulations, has shown interest in neurologically reinterpreting principles and conclusions derived from its analysis. Thus, for example, in one of its latest works, it raises the case of the conception of an object or entity that is missing a component, such as a cat without its tail. In such cases, according to Langacker, there would be a mental progression from a structure of baseline B or substrate 0. Here in the screen, you have the definition of baseline, or substrate 0, complete image of the cat, to another structure BE, baseline and elaboration, or substrate 1, image of the cat with the missing tail, in whose elaboration the conception of substrate 0 would necessarily intervene. If, in neural terms, according to Langacker, structures consist in patterns of activation, subtraction takes the form of suppression or inhibition. Specifically, Lamb posits the existence of different types of inhibitory connections that block the activation of a particular flow of information. While the neurocognitive plausibility conditions of SFL have been raised and explored in depth in relation to certain aspects already mentioned, there do not appear to be any studies investigating possible links between cognitive grammar and relational network theory. That's the aim of this contribution. The aim of this research is precisely to continue a dialogue initiated before, based on two well-defined syntactic semantic phenomena. The first concerned a limited group of parenthetical structures extracted from a sample of oral scientific academic discourse in Spanish, and the second consists of a case of ellipsis analyzed in Langacker 2016. The qualitative analysis of both phenomena will be raised to the treatment and discussion of relevant theoretical and methodological aspects, which aim to demonstrate the neurocognitive plausibility of hypotheses born within cognitive linguistics in general and cognitive grammar in particular. But first, let me refer to some theoretical affinities. Cognitive grammar focuses on the conceptualizing activity of the speaker. One of its main tasks is to unravel the compositional path in the elaboration of linguistic structures. In this conceptualization process, certain constructive alternatives take precedence over other possible ones. This dynamic conception of grammar, centered on the analysis of options and elaborative procedures, seems to be directly related to the dynamism of the relational networks of Sidney Lamb's neurocognitive approach. Here on the screen, I will begin by presenting some key concepts of cognitive grammar corresponding to its latest development, which are compatible with Lambian theory and particularly useful for the proposed case analysis. The first of these consists in fact of two interrelated concepts, baseline and elaboration. The baseline is something already established and under control that can be characterized in abstract terms as a function that joins E at a higher structural level, BE. Here you have a figure 1A, B plus E equal BE. The problem with this characterization is that it does not reflect the dynamism inherent in cognitive processing, which can be seen in figure 1B. Taking this substantial aspect into account, Langacker defines elaboration as an operation consisting in augmentation, adaptation, or additional processing activity. Other details worth noting, despite their apparent obviousness, are that B has a certain priority, as it is the starting point of the elaboration. And, on the other hand, that the elaboration process takes place over a temporal sequence that, in turn, implies a scalar dimension of time. Another relevant concept that we will return to in due course is that of differential. This refers, here you have the elaboration, yes, and the differential contribution made by the elaboration. The characterization of the process does not end here, as it is clear that the structure already elaborated, BE, can serve as a baseline for new elaborations, as shown in figure 1C and 1D. Although 1C only shows the addition of successive layers of a structure, while 1D is more realistic from a cognitive point of view, as it emphasizes dynamism. Both aspects, addition and dynamism, are integrated and made explicit in 1E, where the boxes indicate the different structural strata. As you've seen, we will see later that in 1E, you have different boxes as different windows of attention. You have and you can see the progression of the structure elaboration. Well, this characterization of the elaboration process reveals a serial conception of processing. Seriality is another key concept. Langacker argues that modes of access to new cognitive structures tend to occur in a serial, pairwise, and cumulative manner. In an example such as the following, 1A, taken from Langacker to 2014, the author proposes a segmentation that reflects the serial organization of the clauses. 1B. Each clause is conceived as an attentional window, taking the concept from Talmy, for example, and constitutes the basis or substrate for the elaboration of the next one, as can be seen in figure 2a. In this case, Langacker distinguishes two levels in the graphic representation, a more abstract one, B, which he calls conceptual, figure 2b, and the one of processing itself, which he calls semantic structure, figure 2a. Here you have the semantic structure in the first line, and second, the abstract structure. In another word, he tells that both speaker and receiver or destinatory make the same process in encoding and decoding, the process of translating the abstract structure into the semantic structure and vice versa. And here you can see very clear the windows, the succession of windows of attention. Perhaps I have to clear some specific traces. When you have, you know that A sería Amy, you have two participants in each window. Two focal participants. That's why the rough mark, trajector and landmark, sería agent and patient. But the patient is elaborated in the next window, so you have the complete chain. Amy says, Bob thinks, Chris knows, Doris left. This process, this transition between abstract and semantic structure is intersubjective, as the speaker assesses the mental statement of the other, and is intersubjective, and is also dynamic in its elaboration. Yes, I will go on. Perhaps in the discussion we can expand these ideas. Each of the clauses in figure 2a forms a grouping, a concept linked to the serial view of processing, given that a grouping can become the basis for the creation of new structure. This notion comprises two aspects that will be key to establishing its neurocognitive correlate with the notion of complex lexeme and mutable lexeme within the framework of the concept of sequence management as defined by relation and network theory. First, the constituent elements move in unison, behaving as a single entity, and second, the group exhibits emergent properties which manifest themselves in the group as a whole, are not in its individual components. In Sidney Lamb's relation and network system, each grouping would correspond to an action. See figure 4 here. Each group, each grouping would correspond to an action, which we proposed calling a grouping action or constructional action, noting that the theory only had specific names for the lexeme and the sememe, lexemic action or logon action, and sememic action or ideon action. Here you have, here you have the analytical abstraction, lexeme action, long name, lexemic action, and short name, logon action, is the same with sememe. Yes, I will return in a minute. However, the type of connections we are dealing with, those in example 1b and those discussed in the case analysis section, would fall within what Lams calls complex lexeme, or more precisely, mutable lexeme. Perhaps the name complex logoconnections could be proposed for this latter type of lexeme, which is necessary when dealing with sequences. Okay, I don't know how familiar are you with relational network theory, but before continue, perhaps it will be necessary to pause to define and illustrate more basic notions without which the concepts that are operational valid for this study could not be understood. First, the node. Here is the proposal just described. First, the node as one of the basic components of the relational network, which Lam defines as the meeting place or convergence of the lines or connection of the network. Nodes are classified on the basis of three criteria. A, the orientation of activation, upward versus downward. B, the presence or combination or alternation, and versus or node. And C, the arrangement of the activation flow, order versus unordered. Figure 3 shows, following the compact relational network notation, the types of nodes according to these criteria. Here are the definitions: node, the nodes type, and the definition of a connection as a recurring modular structure with a central line connecting to two nodes, one of which provides multiple connections upwards, the other multiple connections downwards. Here are the different sort of nodes. We are dealing in this specific work with downward order and perhaps we can describe only this. Downward activation from A goes to B and later to C. This is important because Lam introduces a concept, very important concept, that is which is the weighting element. You have to postulate the existence of the weighting a weighting element because you need some time between the apparition of B and then C. Upward activation from B and later from C goes to A. Okay, here we can see a section of a relational network extracted from Lam. Here in the center of the figure, we can see operating the notion of connection. Each dog is a connection, the portion of the network limited by two nodes, one with upward lines of connection and the other with upward and downward connections. Here an example from the translation to Spanish of Sol. You have upward connections to other lexemes, complex lexemes, and to the conceptual category Sol. Here you have conceptual, visual, somatosensorial systems connected to the category. This is a semantic category, so this node is a special kind of node, nodo umbral. Okay. Sorry, I can return to this in the discussion if it's not so clear. Bueno, at this point we can return to the concepts of complex lexeme and mutable lexeme presented above in relation to the notion of grouping. After translating the constituent of analytical syntax, as Lamb calls it, into language of relational networks, in the 6th chapter of Pathways of the Brain, chapter 14 allows us to question the neurocognitive reality of this approach and proposes an alternative approach to studying sequence management. Sorry. Sequence management. It is here, when addressing the problem of sequencing at higher levels, that he starts from a very simple but highly relevant question in neurocognitive terms. Why does language need sequence management? The answer is that it needs to do so in order to deal with two kinds of situation. For fixed, that is lexicalized combinations, hot dog, for example, and for new combinations, any adjective followed by any noun. Figure 5 presents two examples of networks corresponding to both situations. Here you have the fixed expressions connect the dots and a variable expressions to do something to something. I found some problems with the name complex lexeme, because if you have complex, the opposite one would be simple, and the variable expression is not a simple construction. And only the word construction is here applied to variable expression. I think we can say fixed expression, variable expression, and all of both are constructional. Yes, constructional connections. But in the case of the mutable lexeme, this concept would be something in between both concepts, because you have a part of a fixed expression and a part and a variable part also. So you can say here, yes, also let's take the name fixed expression, variable expression or variable lexeme, and a mutable lexeme in between. Okay, I could return to this with examples. An extremely relevant aspect involved in sequence management is that of time. So Cyr had already emphasized the importance of the linear nature of the signifier as a specific property of language. Also, Tesnier, many linguists, time was also a crucial dimension for cognitive grammar, as we have seen. Lamb reflects on how the time factor operates in network mapping and concludes that languages have not only their words, but also the properties of their sequencing as means of expressing meaning. When analyzing the internal structure of the order and node, Lamb conjectures that the structure of this type of node should contain a delay or wait element, as I said before, since the activation coming from one of the lines must be delayed until the next one appears. Of the hypothesis he formulates three hypotheses: feedback timing, fixed interval timing. The third hypothesis that inserts the delay element directly into the AND node, perhaps the most convincing in his view, is the latter. Is this one because it allows for the possibility of non-uniforming timing intervals. When he proposed this hypothesis, Lamb recognizes the need for the further experimental computer simulation on neurological research, though through the identification of neurons or neural groups specialized in the implementation of delay elements. This seems to have proven him right. Time seems to have proven him right. Recently, a research team based at the Calvi Institute for System Neuroscience in Norway discovered that the area of the brain responsible for performing sequential tasks is the medial entorhinal cortex. I found a graphic, but not so here. Here you have the place for entorhinal cortex. In this area where the brain's GPS is located, neuron activity is organized into ultra-slow sequences that can last from tens of seconds to minutes and serve as a template for the formation of new sequences during spatial navigation and the formation of episodic memory. The study is carried out by Gonzalo Ocoña and 2 Nobel Prize, May-Britt Moser and Edvard Moser. Let us recall, when I read this contribution, I recall Lamb's statement: syntax is not just a linguistic phenomenon. And that and also in the epilogue of the 2 powers of the brain, he had already provided information of the cortical areas involved. Well, in the following section, we present, here are some examples of mutable lexemes, but let's wait a minute. In the following section of my exposition, I will present the general methodology. I will skip up the methodological guidelines. Let's face the analysis, the case analysis. First of all, I will refer to, for some parenthetical, here is a quote. Most of the things we have to say require multiple words, said Lamb. But as we can't speak them 2 or more at a time, they have to come up in linear sequence. This being the case, languages have not only their words, but also the properties of their sequencing as means of expressing meaning. Okay. Here are some examples and some hypothetical cases. Hypothetical cases because I have the example drawn on the piece of corpus, but in cognitive grammar, you have methodological, you have to try to prove other ways of saying the same thing, and these construals provides evidence for the different communicative intentions on behalf of the speaker. No? Here is the example. I read it first in Spanish and then in English. Yo, it's a case of a defense doctoral thesis. The jury, the member of the jury says, yo, este título particularmente, esto es materia opinable, te lo hice saber en el informe. No lo veo como representativo del contenido del trabajo. The translation, this title, particularly, this is a matter of opinion. I let you know in the report, I do not see it as representative of the content of the work. The parenthetical is, this is a matter of opinion. Esto es materia opinable. Here, I propose to divide the example in the different intonational unit. So So, taking the concept from Chafe. Yo, este título, I, this title particularly, this is a matter of opinion, the parenthetical. I do not, I let you know in the report, another parenthetical, I do not see it as representative of the content of the work. From a linguistic cognitive perspective, parenthetical comments can be or could be characterized by taking into account the movement of consciousness in discursive elaboration, which comprises 3 states, according to Chafe: active, semi-active, and inactive. According to this distinction, discursive parentheses can be defined as expressions that suspend the enunciative discourse and leave in a semi-active state of consciousness the previous idea in the process of elaboration, an idea that becomes accessible later after the insertion of the parenthetical phrase, and to which new information inactive until that moment is added. Bueno, the example cited come as from a doctoral thesis. In all cases, we first provide the example without breakdown, then broken down. Starting with analysis of this example 2, we may ask ourselves why the speaker, after inserting the second parenthetical structure, 2D, chose to return to 2E, chose to return in 2E to the exact words of the sentence begun in 2C. No lo veo como representativo del contenido del trabajo. I do not see it. Entonces, why the speaker needs to reassume that piece of discourse. In fact, 2C does not recover. If you see 2C does not recover any linguistic material from the interrupted idea in 2A. 2 instead 2E does recover material. So the notion of sequence management, understood as a neurocognitive correlate of serial vision of processing of Langacker, combined with key concepts such as complex lexeme, Lamb 2016, and constructional nection, my proposal, provide valuable elements for venturing a plausible explanation, which can be expressed in the following terms. In 2A, the jury clearly focuses on and delimits the subject or patient that will be evaluated. For this reason, 2A can remain in a semi-active state of consciousness without the insertion of the parenthetical phrase in 2B, substantially affecting the discursive chain. 2C, on the other hand, does not function as an appropriate baseline, that is, it does not provide, in neurocognitive terms, a sufficient flow of information to activate the complex lexeme of a mutable nature. I do not see it. No lo veo. Schematically, do not see name, no ver nombre. I do not see name. No, sorry. I have some examples of mutable lexeme, so you can see here. So here, this is the form of the convention for stating the mutable lexeme. Yes. So the mutable lexeme is I do not see it. To be more precise, to see, I return to the example, to see does not provide the activation force necessary to satisfy the threshold node required for the formation of the complex lexeme in its entirety. For the construction does not consist simply of do not see name, but rather do not see name as attribute. In Spanish, no ver nombre como atributo. The activation flow cannot therefore stop at the first nection, do not see name, but must continue its path to activate the relevant nection. In short, as the nection was not completed, even in its most incipient version, I do not see, the speaker is forced to return to the initial segment. I do not. The comparison with the following hypothetical variants helps to reaffirm the validity of the thesis presented while adding new arguments in their favors. Let us consider two prima and yo in Spanish is more clear. It's clearer. Sorry. Yo este título particularmente, esto es materia opinable, te lo hice saber en el informe, veo como representativo del contenido del trabajo. I decided particularly this is a matter of opinion. I do not, I let you know in the report, see it as representative of the content of the work. As we can see, 2'E is implausibly in neurocognitive terms. Remember that this is a spoken language. If I do not, no law is not repeated, the degree of activation of the negative meaning of the construction is weakened and its positive counterpart gains strength. Another aspect worthy of consideration is the potential problem of the identifiability of the pronominal referent. Although it is clear in Spanish that the objective pronoun it, lo, in 2C does not have the same referent as the objective pronoun it, lo, in 2D. In one case, it refers to the title of the word, and in the other to the content of the report. The proximity between the two establishes a certain relationship of competition at the neurocognitive level. Hence, the need to repeat it, lo, in 2E together with a negative polarity adverb. I consider another reformulation, but I will skip, and let us now consider example 3. Que tomaste dos departamentos. That is a case of doctoral defense in history, and the departments are places, locations in the province of Mendoza, and the member jury says que tomaste dos departamentos y vos lo dijiste. Casi me animo a decir arbitrariamente porque. You took 2 flats or 2 places, and you said so, almost, I dare say, arbitrarily, because, and here you have the parentheticals discriminated. Y vos lo dijiste, me animo a decir. And you said so, I dare say. Unlike in 2E, in this case, it is not necessary to repeat in 3E what is stated in 3C. The quantitative adverb casi, almost. In fact, there are no processing difficulties here, since it is arbitrarily the element that carries the relevant and necessary information for the formation of the adverbial construction, or adverbial nection. Well, from what has been observed, it also appears that it is not necessary. I will skip another example. So let's go perhaps for the discussion. I only said something that referring to two. Yes. No, I think it's not necessary. Yes. No. Let's go to this is another example of parentheticals. We can skip in Spanish and here in English from Octavio Paz. Very interesting. It's a quoting from an essay. It says, his conception of the self was historical, referring to Ortega y Gasset, not the contemplative self who has closed the door on the world, but that of the man in relation. It would be more accurate to say in combat with things and other men. Well, here is very interesting because you have a mutable lexeme in relation, man in relation, and then man in combat, and you have many examples you can make up with many examples of the same sort. Man in communication, for example. Well, I will skip this example. This is a kind of analysis we can apply to parentheticals from a cognitive semantic point of view. You have upward the abstract structure of this example of Octavio Paz, and downwards the semantic structure, hombre en relación, man in relation, the parentheticals with two windows of attention. You have E and F, and then the last part of the discourse interrupted by the parenthetical. Here is another representation. You can see the zero. The zero is the primary attentional window that you are considering in the analysis, and the two parts of the parenthetical just outline it. Okay. The second case is the case of ellipsis, baseline and elaboration in light of Lambian theory. In 5, we recognize a clear example of ellipsis. In the descriptive grammar of the Spanish language, ellipsis is considered a mechanism that limits lexical redundancy in statements. Bruckart, 1999. Thus, it is not necessary to repeat the subject, agent, or the verb from the first segment to understand what is expressed in the second. Alice bought a car, a Mercedes. Each segment consists of a grouping of entities that maintain a strongly consolidated unity among themselves. Both groupings each form a prosodic or intonative unit in terms of shape and describe the same process with its associated participants. It is therefore, I quote Langacker, a discourse sequence organized in a serial fashion, in which the first grouping fully satisfies the baseline condition insofar as it facilitates the elaboration of the second grouping and serves as the basis for its interpretation. In other words, although each structure is processed in its own attention window, and each has its own profile, an event and an object, respectively, the attentional scope is broader and encompasses both, as shown in figure 6a. Here you have window 1, 2, window 1, window 2, and both windows of attentions, Alice, both a car, a Mercedes. And in the upper part, the focal participants, Alice, the verb, both, and car, the process, and car. Bien. However, in the proposed character schematization, as Langacker points out, there is an overlap of conceptual content between baseline and BE, baseline plus elaborations, since in the second window of 6A, not only M, a Mercedes, is profiled, but also a car. In their attempt to resolve the problem of redundancy, figures 6B and 6C are not very effective solutions either. In 6B, a zero substrate, S0, is postulated as a baseline consisting of a hypothetical non-existing structure, Alice bought a Mercedes, to which a subtraction operation would then be applied. The more simple option is 6C. The more simple option in 6C shows the actual process of structure augmentation. Mercedes elaborates the schematic notion of a car, without, in our opinion, avoiding the overlap of semantic information present in the first figure. The increase in structure is even clearer and more transparent in 6D, while both structures are only shown once. Consequently, this figure is the most appropriate as Langacker understands it, describing it in the following terms. B is the conception of Alice buying a car. E is that of a Mercedes. I think that it's better you see the figure. B, 6D. B is the conception of Alice buying a car. E is that of a Mercedes. And BE is the resulting conception of Alice buying a Mercedes in particular. Observe that the analysis does not hypothesize the fully specified clause Alice bought a Mercedes. However, since the discourse construction invokes window 1 as the basis for apprehending the content in window 2, the nominal a Mercedes is understood as if it were part of such a clause. Note further that the conception of a Mercedes constitutes the differential, the portion of BE that is not found in B. That is the complete quoting. An essential feature of the differential, Langacker points out, is that it is identified with the content expressed and focused in the second window. Hence, in his view, the great usefulness of this descriptive construct. Analyzing this case from the perspective of the relational network theory would allow us to validate the neurocognitive reality of Langacker's proposed explanation. Each grouping, the one presented in window 1 and the differential instantiated in window 2, would be identified with an activation line, and both lines would then converge at a AND node, giving rise to a higher order constructional nexion or complex Lig sim, Here too the role of the weight element is fundamental, as it is an order and node. It is important to pause now and consider the syntactic pattern of this complex lexeme from a neurocognitive perspective. We will focus in Spanish, Alicia se compró un auto, un Mercedes. It is returning to the Returning to the beginning of this article and following Lamb 2009, let us remember that the brain's linguistic system is forced to handle sequences, whether they are fixed or lexicalized construction, or new combinations, such as the one in the example presented. Lamb's hypothesis to account for the latter situation is very simple and realistic. The author proposes that some kinds of new combinations may be formed simply by analogy with previously lexicalized forms, that is, using available combinations. And this is indeed the case if we compare 5 with other similar cases. Fernando bought a van, a Ford Ranger. Virginia bought a motorbike, a Sanela. After considering several examples of complex lexeme of various types and lengths, Lamb's hypothesis becomes more precise when he asks about a cognitively plausibly structure that could trigger the analogical process. This is where the concept of the mutable lexeme arises. And now I define it properly. It consists, according to Lamb, of a complex lexeme in which one or more components become variable. We have already seen an example of a mutable lexeme in the previous section with parenthetical construction. In 5, the variable constituents are someone, both, name, vehicle, make, or model. In summary, the type of ellipsis that appears in 5 and in other similar examples would not simply be a strategy used by the speaker to resolve a problem of redundancy, as has been established in descriptive linguistics, but rather a reflection of a neurocognitively consolidated lexical pattern. On the other hand, following the path of the relational network of 5 towards higher levels of conceptual elaboration, the complete sequence is identified with a process or procedure in Lambian terms, as we pointed out at the beginning. The predicate by is an exponent of a material process with specific participants, an agent, buyer, and a subject or patient, purchase object. The network layout of this particular process should consider, in addition to the type of material would acquire, several relevant details such as the division of the patient into possible brands or models, as well other distinction. This is an addenda to show that the relational networks does not end here at the syntactic level, and you have lines connected to the semantic and conceptual levels. That's why the notion of process, for example, according to this example. Conclusions or concluding remarks, very, very few. Here, sorry, some concluding remarks. Here, I presented some theoretical and conceptual correlations between cognitive grammar and relational network theory. In cognitive grammar, you have concepts like cognitive processing and relational network neurocognitive processing. Cognitive grammar, assembling symbolic structures. That is the mode of progressing this structure in discourse. That is the aim, no? Assembling symbolic structures. The focus is to analyze the modes of access to new structures. And in relational network theory, you have relational network pathways, ways of, sorry, I can't I can read my own words. Let me take my notes because I can't. Oh, sorry. Yes, activations of nodes and connections. In cognitive grammar, you have serial organization of clauses rather than hierarchical and sequential access. Each clause provides the basis for interpreting the next. And in relational network theory, you have sequence management, questioning the structure of constituents. In cognitive grammar, you have processing time factor as a Q factor, temporal and scalar dimensions. In relational network theory, activation times and weighting elements. In cognitive grammar, the concept is crucial, the concept of window of attention, the packaging of conceptual and expressive content, information that is fully active in the mind at a given moment. And in relational network theory, it's important to pay attention to the activation of a part of the neurocognitive network, the interconnections between lexical, semantic, conceptual, and perceptual subsystems. In cognitive grammar, you have the sequence of windows of attention of the compositional path. In relational network, you have variable pathways within the relational network. Finally, cognitive grammar defends a dynamic view of grammar and pays attention to the transition between conceptual and semantic structure and vice versa. And in relational network theory, you have to pay attention to the dynamism of relational networks, lines of connection between different types of links, connections to higher and lower levels, and inhibitory connections at the same level. Both approaches share a dynamic view of grammar, serial organization, sequence management, processing time, factor, activation times, and weighting elements. The concept of mutable lexeme is very important in relational network theory, and I think it's very useful to analyze some sort of structure as we have seen. Yeah, I propose it can be either an expression of a fixed expression or a reduction of B, a variable expression of variable lexeme. I put in red complex because I don't like so much complex, so fixed lexeme or fixed expression. Baseline and elaboration is an operational concept for the analysis of the processing of the mutable lexeme. I think that is a good concept for analyzing this concept in relational network theory. And finally, I find that parenthetical and elliptic structures are sources of evidence for the study of the mutable lexeme. Well, here are some slides that are not important here, and here are the references. So, but let me say final words. The examination of a specific set of parenthetical structures and a particular case of ellipsis has provided further evidence in favor of the neurocognitive plausibility of theoretical concepts developed in the field of cognitive grammar, such as grouping and baseline and elaboration. However, this advance would not have been possible without the neurocognitive exploration undertaken by Sidney Lamb in an area such as syntax, where certain approaches seem to be established and accepted without question. We have been able to verify that his alternative view of sequence management with a mapping of networks that incorporate connections such as mutable lexemes and semimes effectively responds to the reality of the analogical mode of reasoning of the human mind. Beyond the proposed analysis and the results achieved, reviewing these and other aspects of Lambian theory reminds us once again that in order to understand how the linguistic system works in the brain, it is sometimes essential to start with simple questions whose answers are not always readily available. That is when Sidney Lamb invites us to think more rigorously, to gather new evidence, and to feel like protagonists in his adventure, the great adventure of human language. Muchas gracias. Thank you. And I don't know how to pronounce in Romano, mulțumesc foarte mult. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Gisela. Thanks a lot. And I especially appreciate this Romanian touch at the end. So thanks a lot. And wow, a lot of stuff there. So if there are any questions, let's open it up for a Q&A session. Well, as usual, if you have a question, you can just unmute your phone and go ahead and ask. You can also raise a biological or a virtual hand if you want.
Okay, I'm Jorge.
Yes, Jorge, go ahead.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for Gisela's invitation. It was a very clear presentation and an in-depth analysis supported by an array of examples, a clear review of previous theoretical frameworks, and the proposal of new insights or future lines of research. Talking about overlapping, this cognitive area is not my field of expertise because I'm within the field of genre analysis. But I would like to ask Gisela, talking about overlapping, the windows that she showed in some of the figures, maybe the first ones, that she mentioned that in that figure, there is a representation of sequentiality. Can there also be an overlapping in those boxes? This is because talking about overlapping, because she mentioned overlapping at the end of her talk. And but in the first, let's see.
I have the power.
Yes, before that, let's see. This one.
This one?
No. The ones that you showed with the boxes, one after the other.
Figure 6?
The other one, the previous one. Let's see if there is a previous one. It was just at the very beginning that you showed the... Well, don't worry. Maybe... Sorry
here?
for...
No, I here, this example.
Maybe this one, yes. In example B, you have different boxes, one inserted into the other. And you spoke about sequentiality, if I'm not mistaken, of course. But is there a probability of overlapping in this graph, in this figure?
No, here you have no overlapping in. I think a better word is embedded. You have you have those two levels, an abstract one what he called abstract, and a semantic, and more concrete or semantic, a level of semantic. Is the actual form in the speaker processes the structure. Is the semantic structure 1A. And 1B is the classical analysis we are accustomed to in syntaxis, just to boxes like a mamushka, no? A box, but it's an abstract representation. You have embedded a structure, but when you construct a structure in discourse, your compositional path implies that you divide the series of the discourse flow into several windows of attention. Here, this example is very clear, but in parentheticals, we found other examples, but not always is simple to divide the discourse into the windows of attention. I think the most close notion in descriptive linguistics is that notion of chafe with intonational units. You divide the discourse in intonational units. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, it was very clear because you mentioned that it was those boxes were embedded. Yes. Okay.
Ay, perdón.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I will leave the power because if anybody wants.
And I think John Paul has a question. Please.
I can't see.
That is correct. I have a question. The notion of nection, I find that interesting. I'm used to thinking of a nection as something a lot simpler. If I can get you to visualize it by description, I think of two nodes, one above the other. Starting from the top, you see the plural side of a node, and then on the bottom of that node, you see a singular one line going down to the top, the singular side of another node, and then on the bottom of the whole thing, you have a plural side of that node coming out. But it's been a long time that I've thought that these diagrams, when they get big, can be awfully complicated and difficult to read. So if there could be some way of, like, modularizing it sometimes, so that this module does this and it's connected to other ones, and so this you seem to have an idea of nection that can be bigger, and I like that idea. So does my notion, what I'm used to about nections, does that need an update?
Yes, that's why I think that the nection, you have to enhance the notion of nection, or to expand better, to expand and to comprise this sort of constructional nections or syntactic nection. I don't know. Constructional nection, I think it's a good term, no? Because that's what I try to apply in this diagram. Emi says things.
I like the idea of constructional nection, because I've seen some presentations on construction grammar, and you'd be able to have some nice dialogue with those folks.
Oh, thank you. I try to elaborate more on this notion. I will try to enhance. Yes, thank you.
Or maybe
any comments, Dr. Lamb?
Sorry, what you can do, Gisela, is to verbalize the process that you have done and explain it in order to make it clearer. Because probably for a person who is a novice, this diagram will be a world. And maybe if you paraphrase or explain all the processes that you have done within this diagrams, which are very interesting. In fact, this will be very helpful.
Oh no, this diagram is I always try sketch this diagram with a pen first, and then because it's very difficult really. I admire Lam with his theory, but the diagram is an aspect very clear to see. The diagrams are very difficult to draw. the
Well,
diagram.
this one is very well drawn. Nice job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But I should say that my father is designer, so he helps me a lot with this diagram. Yes.
There is a tendency nowadays that I read in many books that when you create something, a framework, or even a diagram or a figure, there should be some kind of explanation about the results of those components. That is to say, a framework, a figure, which will explain how you get to this. So this is why I was suggesting you to explain the procedures that you underwent.
Yes, I understand. Perhaps you are not so familiar with the relational network theory. I suppose that you all are familiar. Now here you have
the diagrams.
Yes. You have to need some notions because these triangles are nodes, and these brackets are under other types of nodes. You have AND node and OR nodes. The nection is the portion limited between the two nodes. Here, suppose you have MSS, the contraction nection, and then the limited by two nodes. Perhaps Jose Maria helps me to explain more here, as you have here we have the translator of the book to Spanish, and you can read the book in Spanish, Jorge. Pero acá are the different types of nodes and the flow of activation, downward and order and, downward and order or, and so forth. And here you have the explanations. I think that it consumes time. I don't know. We can speak later on these notions. Okay.
Thank you, Gisela, for your thorough analysis, for your deep analysis. Yes, because your contribution is great for the ongoing of the discipline. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
If I may, Gisela, I have let's say a more general question. Can you hear me?
Yes, can I sorry, can I stop the presentation? I would like to see you in face.
Yeah. I don't think you'll need it for my question. So I was saying I have a more general question, like, I don't know, maybe related to this relation that you mentioned between cognitive linguistics and relational network theory. So I was wondering, after all this research you've been doing in trying to put them together, how do you see these two approaches? Do you think they talk about different ways of understanding these cognitive mechanisms that are like different in some details, and maybe we will need to see which one is, let's say, closer to the reality? Or do you see them as sitting at different levels of granularity, maybe? And then one of them is more of a general way of seeing things, and then the other one can look into more details. So how do you see the relationship between these two theoretical models?
Yes, I think that they are complementing. They complement each other because the neurocognitive perspective is very general in, if you want to say in that terms, on behalf of cognitive linguistics. They assume certain hypotheses, but there are no insights, deeply insights in neurocognitive terms. Only you have expressions like a strength of activation or yes, for example, Langacker defines determinants. For example, Langacker says that the elements or exponents of a system, the system of determiners, for example, being in opposition and mutually exclusive, would be neurologically connected by inhibitory rather than excitatory links. I think that they use some notions from neurolinguistics or neurocognitive approach, but they don't cite specifically the work of Lamb, for example, or very few mention. But that's why my motivation is to deepen in this connection, and I think that Lamb fundamentals, that the foundations, gives the foundations of cognitive hypothesis born in cognitive linguistics, but I give the scientific and scientific foundations for those hypotheses. Yes, with his deeply insight of brain and functions and neurons, that is absent in the other approach.
Okay, thank you very much.
But I think that we are the, o sea, no sé cómo decirlo en español, es que in the last Congress of Cognitive Linguistics, worldwide Cognitive Linguistic Congress, there will be more sections in which connecting neurological approaches to understanding language, sobre todo in gestures studies, in gesture and eye tracking, in the sort of things, in multimodality. Multimodality is a great area in which you can see these sort of connections.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Okay, so are there any other questions? Well, apparently no. Thank you again, Gisela. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being here and being part of CELINE. So stay tuned. We will have another great talk next month given by Jose. And then some other coming up. John Paul will also be with us sometime later. Then we'll have Chris Goldstone from California State University at Fresno. So a lot of great talks coming up. We'll let you know about them by the email as always. And till then, you have a great weekend.